All right, everybody. I'm super excited to introduce you to one of my dinner guests, Sarah. And we are going to talk about what happens when you come to dinner with Shannon and Amy. Hold on, here we go.
Welcome to the Grow Your Business for Good show. This is a place where coaches and consultants gather so you can learn how to lead a world-class business that does not tax your time, your energy, or your financial resources. We are your hosts, M. Shannon Hernandez
And Amy Hager of the Joyful Business Revolution. And our number one goal is to bring you clarity and insight on how to grow your business for good. All right, welcome everybody. It's just me, Amy, here today. I gave Shannon the day off from the podcast because my beautiful friend Sarah has joined me. So, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on our show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So Sarah is someone who lives in the DC area and she owns this beautiful company called District Bliss. And so, Sarah, why don't you first tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you're doing in this world before we talk about dinner?
All right. I am Sara Alepin. I'm the founder and CEO of District Bliss, and we're a community of introverted and extroverted business owners who are sick of that stodgy style of networking and who are really ready to break free from that so we can build our businesses with ease. And we do that through roundtable conversations, workshops, networking socials that are fun, approachable, and have high ROI, and so much more. So this mastermind dinner was right up my alley.
I love it. And that was exactly why I invited you because I was like, this is perfect for Sarah. And I think she'll absolutely love at being at a table. But from your perspective, Sarah, like, why did you even block off the 2 hour time to come to dinner with us? Like, what made you choose or want to choose to come to this dinner?
I think a lot of times we are building our businesses even in a silo, even if we have a team. And
Mm.
there's so much value in human connection and the ability to have conversations that are meaningful and not just about, basic business things, which are also important. Your
Yeah.
tech stack is important, but there are other parts of us that I think need to be filled. And this type of dinner was going to be a really meaningful way to connect with other brilliant entrepreneurs who are excited and enthusiastic, share my values
Yeah.
and really care about uplifting one another and are really thoughtful and intelligent humans.
I love that. And so then knowing that that's kind of what you value and what you were looking forward to, I think that you're nailing it on the head. Like both of our brands breathe that deeper connection, that having conversations that are real, that can make a real impact in our lives and our business. And it's super duper important for people who choose to come to dinner with us to also come in with like an open heart. You never know who else is going to be sitting at that table. And so, what was your experience like meeting, I mean, people that you had no idea who they were or what they did or where they came from? I mean, I emailed everybody, everyone's LinkedIn or Instagram handle before, and you all were on an email before coming to dinner, but you really didn't have that opportunity to meet these people until sitting at the table. So what was that experience like?
Well, it was great that you sent out the links and everything, but your online presence doesn't really tell your whole personality. We are very highly curated in our online presence. So there is a bit of a risk that you assume going into a dinner with people that you think your values aligned with and that you think you'll get along with, but maybe you won't. And so you're assuming a tiny bit of risk there. But I think it's just the experience was when I walked in, I felt very welcomed. And I know you weren't there yet when I arrived. But I felt very welcomed by the people who were there, and they were very enthusiastic about the entire experience. So the way that you had curated the conversation to that point, which was limited on our end, but you gave us a lot of instruction, feedback, and information leading in. So we all knew what to expect, and we all had we all did go in with an open heart. We all went in with a, even those of us who were introverted or are introverted were excited to be open and embrace new people. And I
Mm,
think that sets the tone for the entire experience off the bat. It makes it really comfortable to be able to have a conversation, to speak up in a space that can be very intimidating when you don't know people, to actually, when you're having a deep, meaningful conversation, it can be easier to sit back and let other people take the lead.
yeah.
And I feel the way the guests that were chosen and the way that it was curated made it very easy to slide in and say the thing that came to your heart and your mind in that moment, which is very important. And there's a ton of value in being able to speak up instead of sitting back or shrinking small in those
Right.
spaces.
And so then knowing that you do identify as an introvert and I identify as an extrovert. So
Oh,
like,
I'm an extrovert.
oh, you're an extrovert. Okay, good. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you identify as an introvert. So knowing that we are both the extroverted type and that it is very important for us to be not over extroverted for our introvert friends. How do you think that this format, the Jeffersonian style conversation, having the cards on the table. So when we introduced ourselves, it wasn't just who are you and what do you do? We are actually answering a question. How do you think that helps as people warm up and get to know each other? So that we can actually go deep. I mean, it seemed to help, but how did you feel about the kickoff of the dinner and having that question to answer instead of having to say who you are and what you did?
Yeah, I mean, it's so DC to go in and say, "Hi, I'm Sarah." And like, what do you do?
Right.
Um, so that just kicked that feeling up for me. So one, it was a relief to deviate from that because that's a very DC thing to say. It's like, who are you? What do you do? And how can I leverage this connection in some capacity is very
Exactly.
much a DC thing.
Yes.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. It is just exhausting sometimes.
Yeah.
But having something that was a prompt, that wasn't a silly prompt, like one of those
Yeah.
face value icebreakers, those have their place. They
Right.
are not the fit for this kind of dinner. So having something where you had to reflect on your past, your own story,
Mm,
and answer a more thoughtful question, I thought really made it easier to get to know what people were actually thinking. And it set the tone for, even though we did the introductions and everything afterward, it set the tone for people to be able to share things that really were probably not, probably weren't discussed outside of that circle. So,
yeah.
in the needs or the gives and wants,
Yeah. The gives
we
and
had yes, thank you. We had someone share a very high, actually twice, we had someone share a very highly personal want.
right.
They gave a reason that they wanted to add a team member that was a very personal reason. And
Yeah.
I think those are not often, we don't come to an event thinking we're going to share what's going on in our families,
Right.
when we're talking about business. And having a question that shared something that was pretty personal, thoughtful, and intentional gave us the opportunity to then open that door for the rest of the conversation and evening.
Yeah, and I think that's really important and part of, something that we really believe in at the Joyful Business Revolution is your life and your business are so intertwined. But we were all raised, especially in the corporate space, to have your professional you and your personal you. And those two could never cross, or they shouldn't cross. And so I think to really help entrepreneurs, service-based business owners, and CEOs really embrace that we only live one life. And when you are a business owner, it is a very, very big piece of your life. And there's other big pieces of your life too, and they all play together. It's like an orchestra. And so I think that having a good question to get to know a few of the people to begin with, and then going around and really being able to expand around the table and connect on that deeper so that people do feel safe to share really what's going on. Because when we can share what's really going on, that's how we can actually make progress in either coming up with a solution, either holding the space to let that person feel what they need to feel through, right? We don't always have answers and we don't always need to have answers. So I really like that you had felt that as well. And I think the other guests, obviously did. Talk to me or talk with me. So Sarah and I are planning on actually co-hosting these dinners in DC on the regular. And one thing that I really appreciate about you is how do we choose our guests and how to look at who to choose our guests. And so, I think it's really important to make sure that the guests that you're choosing, and you kind of alluded to this, DC very much so is transactional. When you introduced yourself, who are you? What do you do? And I'm thinking, how can you help me? How can I leverage this relationship? When we're choosing guests to invite to this table, how do we be intentional about who we're inviting so that we can start breaking through that you're only coming to this to figure out how to leverage the other 6 or 7 people at the table. So how do we break that culture?
Yeah, and I mean, it's specifically, you hit the nail on the head that it is specifically hard to do that in DC because you also have to be able to communicate to the guests that this is not the reason you're coming.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be having them travel extreme distances either.
Especially with DC traffic, which might have been why I was a little bit late getting in and Sarah walked in to the last dinner. And so then when you think about who you are going to invite to our next opportunity, our next dinner, what are you thinking through? Like, what are some of the qualities and what are some of either the things that you're preparing them with or the questions that you're asking yourself about this person?
I think the first thing you need to ask yourself is, why am I inviting this person?
Mhm.
Because it can't be that you're looking to leverage your connection with that person to up level in some capacity or to learn from that person. And we chatted a bit about this offline, but I have a friend who is a wedding planner and who wanted to host these types of dinners. And when she talked about who she wanted to invite, and it was her first year in business
Yeah.
and she was growing, she wanted to invite like the top of the top wedding planners in the DC area who are doing like minimum $200,000 weddings.
Okay.
And my sense was she wanted to learn from them and she wanted to
Mm,
have that connection with them so that she could then um you know up level her business as she grew. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that is not this type of dinner. So the first thing is ask yourself, why do I want to invite this person? They should be adding something to the group. They should be literally bringing something to the table in this case that adds value for everyone and moves the conversation further and deeper than it would be if they weren't there.
mm,
So starting with that, I think, my biggest thing is ask yourself why.
yeah. Yeah.
And then start kind of building it out. It's not to use the wedding thing too many times, but now it's in my brain. So here we go. Think about if you were assigning people to a table at your wedding
Mm,
and who
mm,
you would want to put together because you want your wedding experience to be amazing, right? You're like, everything about your wedding really is thoughtful and intentional. So who would you sit at this table with Amy in this case? Who would I choose to bring to the table with Amy that's going to add value to Amy's life in some capacity and make an impact on Amy? And that Amy can also add value to that person. So if you think of it from that standpoint, that might make it a little bit easier if you have planned a wedding in the
yeah.
past. I also think you want a good mix of introverts and extroverts.
Yeah. I would agree with you. That way, it's not like a table of all extroverts and we're all just like trying to talk at the same time, right? Or a table of
Yeah.
all introverts. I do think having that mix, and I think, even when I think about the people who were at our mastermind dinner table, extroverts, introverts, but what I loved is we had a mix of their industry, right? They weren't all in the same industry. As we got talking, there were some similarities in industry, or maybe someone had been in the same industry prior, or they've had some sort of experience. We did happen to have two people who do very different law practices at the table.
Yeah.
I don't think that at all made it feel like all we did was talk about lawyer stuff at all, because they really, really tapped into their CEO self and not their lawyer self. And I think that was a beautiful thing to see. And so I love having people from all different walks of life, all different backgrounds. And when I think about the people that, we invited to this last mastermind, it was a woman that I know because I do a fall wine bus every year, and I knew she just started her law firm on her own. And, I don't know much about her business or what she's doing, but I love our conversation. She's a super fun person. So I was like, she's going to be really fun to have at dinner. We also invited an author who just literally had a new book published that week, and she didn't bring it with her to share, but she brought past work to share. And the last person that I invited was someone who I do feel like is a very traditional DC person who lives on the hill, who is very much so into, advocacy and all of the work that is done on the hill. But I knew she could go really, really deep with people. And she really focuses on internal communications. And so I know she's a great communicator and a great question asker. So I knew by at least inviting those three people to our table that, one, they weren't going to know each other. So it was a new introduction for them to be with each other. Well, and then I also had Shannon at the table too. So that was really great. And then the other two people, Sarah, that who were at our table last time were people that you knew. And so what about them do you feel really elevated our conversation?
I think they are both very much looking for connection
Yeah.
on a human level.
Oh, that's so
And
true.
yeah, they're brilliant. And I think they feel a bit isolated. They don't have an entrepreneurial friend group
Yeah.
in the way that, I do. Because I made a business that builds
Yeah, I was gonna
friendships. And
that is your business, right? Is
it is.
networking, creating those safe spaces to meet other business owners. I mean, you own a networking organization that does really well on creating those spaces. So I totally get what you're saying. Like they right now don't belong to something that has that opportunity. So at least to bring that opportunity to a dinner one night. And it was interesting because one of them didn't go to work out that night. And she said that was a choice she had to make. Was she going to leverage this really personal invitation from Sarah to come to dinner with people she had never met before? Or was she going to follow her routine and go and work out? And I loved that she shared that with us. And I love that she chose this opportunity to explore something different and new. And I'm really, really curious to see what friendships also blossom from the eight people who were at that table that night.
I agree. I think, yeah, it was interesting because when she shared what gave her joy, it was her workout class.
Yeah,
So it's even more of an acknowledgement when then she said, I chose to skip my workout class so that I could come to this dinner. And I had to follow up with her to, and I also made it very clear, this was another thing. I did not want people to think that this was me inviting them to something so that I could pitch to them because that's not the appropriate place to do this.
so
If
true.
that's your goal, not the right format.
Right.
Um, I also didn't want them to think I sent this out to my whole list.
Right.
So when I sent the email, I said, this is a personal invite in parentheses.
Yeah.
Because it could have very well seemed like I was sending it out to everybody. And I also know I love these two women, and I know they love me too, but they probably wouldn't have come if it was going to be like a larger group.
Right.
I mean, one of them probably would have. The
Yeah.
other one definitely would
Not
have
at
gone to
all.
her workout class.
Yeah. Love that.
Um, and I think she had to measure the value of that against, what the value is. And I think because they both, the reason that I wanted to invite both of them is because I knew that they would come out of that having been impacted,
Yeah.
and having gotten something out of it that they really needed themselves,
Hmm.
and that I had seen that through our personal interactions.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. So I love this, Sarah. I love that we were able to kind of cover, well, your experience as a guest and then your experience now as the co-host of these in DC with me, and really what we think about when we are inviting people, how we're really intentional about it, how we're intentional about the space that we're holding and about the conversations that we're having. And I think the cool thing is now we get to see what new friendships or what new collaborations or what new ideas or partnerships or whatever you want to call them blossom from making this connection. And so thank you for being a partner and connecting with me.
Oh, well, thank you for being a partner and connecting with me.
So tell us really briefly, because I love what you're doing at District Bliss. What are you the most excited about for 2025 in District Bliss? What's coming down the runway?
We have a lot of exciting educational opportunities and collaborative opportunities coming down the pipeline. We have a new membership benefit that we're launching that's going to really help people further their expertise and get support they need in very specific ways. So we have some really exciting membership benefits coming up, that will be very collaborative and very much open discussions and education sharing and knowledge sharing. So, yeah.
Well, I'm excited and I'm excited to brainstorm a little bit with you at our next dinner when we host one in DC. So, yay. Well, thanks for
Yeah.
coming on the show today.
Thank
Um,
you for having me.
You're very welcome. And when we're talking about collaborations, this is the next episode coming up in the podcast. I'm super excited for you all to meet Chef Anna and her husband Rob because we've collaborated with them. They own the La Bonita Culinary Experience in Mexico, and that's where we host one of our mastermind retreats. And this couple has built something really, really special within this community so that you can experience yummy food, a deep connection with nature, a deep connection with your fellow retreat guests. And it's just an hour outside of Mexico City in the foothills of the mountains. So it's so beautiful. So you get to meet them on the next episode. And until I'm back with Shannon, we will see you all later. Bye.
Bye.